How are you doing tonight, Josh?
I'm doing well. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. How do you know Mark?
Well, I've known him since he was about 5 or 6 years old.
Fair. Fair. Where are you from?
In Perry, Utah.
There you go.
I grew up down the street. I crossed the orchard basically from him.
Oh yeah. Is that your hometown, Mark? Perry?
Yeah, yeah, that's where.
Nice.
Yep, that's it. hmm That's where I grew
Sweet.
up. Can you hear me all right, Dale?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, good.
Give me just a second.
Okay, yeah, and then Dale and I, we actually met in Minnesota. Don't you
Dragon,
know?
Minnesota.
In Bagley, Minnesota. Wasn't it you that I walked across the Mississippi River with, Dale?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Back over at Lake Itasca, where it takes you like 12 steps.
I
You
Did you
know.
waited.
guys meet on your mission or what?
Uh huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was fun.
Yeah.
I want to see the Mississippi. I think it's either the Snake or the Colorado is the biggest one I've seen, and it seemed like it was large, but I was like, this ain't even a quarter mile across. I wonder what the Mississippi looks like.
Like it gets so big, but it starts out as a little, what, like maybe 12 feet wide trickle going out of a lake.
Exactly.
So it's pretty impressive what a lot of addition over a long period of time can do.
Yes.
That's
So,
for sure.
so I'll ask that question to you guys. That's an interesting parallel that we could draw. So the Mississippi River starts at Lake Itasca, which is this pretty small lake up in Minnesota, and it grows to be like I don't know what size or what the ranking is compared to other rivers, but the Mississippi's got to be one of the largest. I don't know. It's one of the most
It's a
influential.
mile across at some points. I know that.
Yeah, and
That's right.
it's crucial to the American economy, to say the least, right?
Well, tell him
Dale
again.
has 3 kids,
I
three
do.
young children.
Brand new baby, a 6 year old.
Hello.
That's her bouncing in the background. I just sent her off to go get me some water because I'm gonna spend some of the time busying my mind by making a Durango. So, but yeah, 6 year old and a 6 year old, 3 year old, and a 3 month old. So
Josh has a daughter. She's how old is she now?
She's about 3.5.
Three and a
nice.
half.
My dad was making one of these.
What is
Oh,
it? A
you
drink?
can't really see it. You gotta show it
One of
if you can
these.
see it. Are you familiar at all with what a Durango is, Mark?
No.
So basically, you take very, very fine sand and you add a little bit of water and you make it into a ball of mud. And then you start polishing it after after it's a little bit more complicated than that. But if you Google it, you'll find some. I've gotten this one actually will reflect the light a little bit, but it's just
Looks
water and mud.
it looks like a polished stone, honestly.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
crazy. But it's a good, I say it's a good use of the time. It's a good, if you got something to think about, it's a good use of time, a good way to busy your hands. And I sat down, realized I had all my stuff here for it, and thought, I've been thinking about making one that'll fit the size of this shot glass. What's
Okay.
up?
So here's my question for you guys.
Shoot.
What is something like that Mississippi River that starts really, really small, but then becomes something that is great and mighty? Like a Durango is one example, actually. Starting as sand and then it's
Yeah.
forming into a polished stone. That's pretty.
You start with dust that you can barely see,
Uh huh.
and then over time, working on it, polishing it down. All right. Something that's like the Mississippi, where it starts small, but eventually becomes so massive that you can't cross it without a boat or something like that. I would say where my brain goes is any endeavor that benefits from the compound effect. I don't know if you've ever read The Compound Effect. It's a book by Darren Hardy. Fantastic book. He goes into talking a little bit about how things that have consistent and regular effort applied to them eventually bring about fantastic results. But the effort, so long as it's consistent, is what makes the difference there. That's one thing that comes to mind. So it could be something as simple as, or as complicated as a business, or as simple as a child growing.
I thought of a good one.
Yeah.
The Abrahamic Covenant.
Yeah.
That's small. That starts small. That's
I'd say yeah. It starts with something as like simple as a family.
Well, it started with doubt. Abrahamic Covenant. Hey, it started out with some story in the Bible about Abraham and his wife Sarai. No, wait. What's?
That's right. Her name was Sarah, I believe.
Okay, and then he promised that his posterity would be as the sand of the sea. And they basically laughed at him and said, "Huh, there's no way that we can have a child because we're old." And they ended up having one, and that's what started the whole thing, right?
Yeah, that's how the story goes. Yeah, Abrahamic Covenant is a fantastic example, and it really depends too, because there's so many different aspects to the Abrahamic Covenant as far as that's concerned. It's more than just a promise, but it's also I mean, the amount of children. I put that in quotes because so many of the people who benefit from the Abrahamic Covenant, it's more than just Jews, according to the new law established by Jesus Christ. So, I mean, yeah, that's a very good example of something that started small and grew to be massive. One thing that comes to mind is pearls. I mean, if we're just shooting out whatever comes up.
Is the Abrahamic Covenant out of the like Old Testament, or where does that one? Because I just started the Bible, and I'm probably very near where that is in there.
Have you got to the part where shortly before Isaac is born, God makes a promise to Abraham and tells him, "Your posterity, I will raise up more posterity to you than there are sand." It says sand in the sea, but I'm assuming it's more like sand on the beach. I don't know, because I guess there's a lot of sand in the ocean. That makes sense when you really think about it.
Either way you look at it, it's like...
I think he does say sand in the sea, but maybe I don't know.
Sand in the sea or stars in the heavens?
Stars. It is stars.
Is it stars?
I think it's both.
Yeah, stars in the heavens.
I
did read that part.
That's what he tells him. He says, I'll expand your posterity so much so that there will be more than can possibly be counted. What's funny about that is that Abraham's wife at that time, a lady named Sarah? Yeah, Sarah. She hears this. Well, later, there's an angel that comes to them because she's barren. She can't have kids anymore. This angel shows up and he's like, "Hey, by the way, you're gonna have a kid," and she's like, "Ha ha ha," and the angel's response is, "You're going to name him Isaac," which in their language means she laughs or laughter. So it's basically the equivalent of like, "Yeah, right. Oh, by the way, you're going to name your son Doubt because you're doubting me." And sure enough, that's exactly what he was named. They were like 90s when they had their son, right?
Yeah, but people used to live a lot longer back then.
That's true.
Now we die early. Probably because we're so degenerate.
Mark's text message to me earlier, King Isaacson. Just random, like name, I don't know.
I just thought of that. Yeah, that was totally random. I don't know that.
I just got like an Ethiopian Bible. I believe it's the like most pure one out there, so that's why I'm back at the New Testament or the Old Testament.
So you're reading an Ethiopian Bible?
Yeah, I'll go grab it real quick.
Have you heard of these Ethiopian Bibles, Dale?
Have I what?
Have you heard of the Ethiopian Bibles?
I know that there is a sect of Christianity that has maintained an incredible amount of purity.
Mm-hmm.
and that they were somewhere in Africa, Coptic, Ethiopian, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, I can also think about a lot of different stuff that Joseph Smith said about the Bible in general. And so my response to that is that could potentially be contradictory, but at the same time, I can't cite it and I don't know. So I'm kind of inclined to say something along the lines of, that is super cool. Tell me what you learned.
Yeah.
The complete Ethiopian Bible in English, including the missing book of Enoch and Jubilees.
Ooh, they put Enoch in there. That's a fun one.
I wonder how that differs from the King James. That would be interesting.
It was before the King James. It was before the Geneva too. At
Yeah.
least to my knowledge.
So our current Bible is actually like a mismatch, not a mismatch, but like a patchwork quilt of different people's experiences, perceptions, and understandings. And the fact that it came out the way that it has is pretty incredible. There are a lot of people saying, no, we want to put this in, we want to put this in, and different, I would call them groups of people, like glorified book, how would you say that? Basically, glorified book clubs of people that were like, hey, we need to get something big together, and that basically just puts all the good holy writing in one place. So there are a lot of different people like jockeying, like, oh, we should put this book in, we should put that book in. So the fact that we got the book that we currently have, I remember that there was like when I was doing studies about it back during my time in college, I remember that there was like it was down between the current version and one other version that didn't have James in it. And I mean, and Mark, you know how pivotal James was in a lot of things. So
James? Yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah. Okay.
and so that's which I thought was a very fascinating thing to learn about as far as that was concerned. I'm very curious to know more about the Ethiopian Bible as it stands. When you were going to go get it, Mark asked me if I knew anything, and I was like, I know that there was a group of Christians that did a very, very good job of keeping a lot of sacred writings together who were down in Africa, which is where I'm familiar with where the Ethiopian Bible eventually came from. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. But if there's anything in there that you're like, well, hey, well, I guess the better way to say it is you would, if this is your first time fully reading through, there wouldn't be anything that you'd be like, oh, this is how it's different because you haven't read anything else. But
Yeah, I've read a little bit of it, but not the whole way through the King James.
yeah,
Yeah, it's been a while, but
right.
I wouldn't notice the difference. Honestly, I haven't done enough studying to notice the difference.
So reading one of the
I did
bloody
hear that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopian lands, but that's just hearsay.
right, I would say so. Here you are reading easily one of the most contradictory and even bloodiest books in history. Is there anything cool that you really like so far that you've read out of it?
I'm still in the.
I mean, cool in the sense of wow, this super spiritual thing got me, or dude, I just watched this guy behead somebody. It was legit. So like, I'm talking cool in all senses of the word.
Right now, I'm just learning about the families. Like this person was born of this person, lived this many years.
So where are you in it?
Actually, there was a big at the very. I'm just like at the start of this because I haven't had this for very long. But where I finished last night, I was like, there has to be some serious, deeper like meaning behind this part that I'm not sure what it actually means. Let's see. I need to get a highlighter too for stuff like this, but when he saw that he didn't prevail against him, the man touched the hollow of his thigh and the hollow of Jacob's thigh and was strained as he wrestled. The man said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." Jacob said, "I won't let you go unless you bless me." He said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." He said, "Your name will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have fought with God and with men and have prevailed." Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." He said, "Why is it that you ask me what my name is?" So he blessed him there. Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for he said, "I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved." The sun rose on him as he passed over Peniel. I didn't read actually. Oh
How do
yeah,
you
maybe it
spell
is right
that?
here.
How do you spell that word? Pin.
It's it's Peniel. Peniel. Peniel.
They're playing it close.
It's the pineal gland, dude.
Penny look.
It's the
And he limped
pineal.
because of it. Yeah.
The pineal gland.
The sun rose on him as he passed over Peniel, and he limped because of his thigh. Therefore, the children of Israel don't eat the sinew of the hip, which is on the hollow of the thigh, to this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh and sinew of the hip. That's where I was like trying to figure out what that meant exactly. Like, we're not supposed to eat like, was it like a sexual reference too? Maybe like a sin because it's talking about the pinhole,
Oh, it
the
sounds
hip
like
of the
pineal
thigh.
gland too.
Well, one thing. So basically, what happens there? Jacob decides to spend the night on this side of the river. He sent his entire family across, and he's like, you know what? I just got to have it out. I can't focus. I'm having a hard time, and this is because he's heard that his brother Esau is coming. So I don't know if you gathered up all that. All of this is just me reiterating from what I know. So he's heard his brother Esau is coming with like 10,000 men or a lot of guys. The number is arbitrary, coming with a lot more than Jacob has.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jacob is just scared, actually. He's scared for his family. He's worried. And the reason is because um, last time they were together, Jacob totally tricked Esau and stole his right to their father's blessing. So their dad was dying. It was looking like it's about time for old man Isaac to kick the bucket.
And
And
the mom told the Jacob to go steal everything, like basically go lie and manipulate their dad, get the
Oh
blessing.
yeah, he got blessed instead of the other.
that was actually like a fulfillment of something. And this is the thing, like years and years before, Esau comes in from hunting and he's like, "Hey, dude, I'm hungry." And Jacob's like, "I'll give you some of this food if you give me your birthright." And so, like joking back and forth between siblings is kind of how I perceive that. But Jacob was actually playing for keeps. Apparently, his mom heard about it and was like, "So Esau just gave up his birthright." And she started playing favorites, and so Jacob got the blessing, and he decided to leave because Esau was very, very upset. So Esau's coming back. Jacob's been wandering for a long time.
They were
He,
enemies. They became
what?
enemy. They became enemies.
Yeah,
He was afraid that Esau would kill him.
yeah. And
With
so
good reason.
He sends his family across the river and spends all that time, and he's basically wrestling with God. So that's why this heavenly messenger, whether it's God himself or not, doesn't really make much of a difference. But this heavenly messenger shows up and starts wrestling with them. And best way I can think to explain is like the messenger came to talk to him, and Jacob's response was to grab the dude and was like, "Bless me." And he's like, "No, I'm just here to talk to you." And he's like, "Bless me." And so, like, full on wrestling match ensues as this guy's trying to get away and Jacob's keeping him down. So he breaks his hip, like, just casually touches it, and it, like, dislocates. And when you're asking, like, is that like a sexual reference? What's going on there? It's not necessarily a sin because so much of what the Israelites eventually do is all centered about remembering. And so they're like, hey, don't eat that because us refraining is a way of us remembering what God has done for our forebears. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the equivalent of what would it be the equivalent of, Mark?
Well, I'm just gonna derail
Like a
that. I'm just gonna
like a
derail.
wedding ring.
What?
Like a wedding ring.
Okay.
You wear it to remember or something.
Well, there's a couple things too that's been pointed out before with that story is that you can wrestle with God and you might get your way, but you might actually walk with a limp after that forever.
You're not coming
You-
out of that experience unscathed, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Yeah. So another thing too that kind of makes that a pretty neat story is that's how Israel, the nation, got its name. Is
I figured that was what that was.
some dude tried grappling with an angel and it didn't go well for him. Which is it's a good what's the term? Kind of like a good type or a good foreshadowing for how Israel more or less handles all their problems. Maybe
you
not in the modern day, but in the scriptures at least.
do you know anything about the god of Egypt or whatever called Isis?
Me or Joshua?
Any of you guys? Either of you guys?
I know a little bit,
A little bit.
not enough to like really go into detail about.
She was affiliated a lot with the rainbow. I know that much. Feminine
Really?
god.
I didn't know that.
I think the rainbow and the ibis. I want to say.
What about Ra?
He was the god of the sun. Dude with the eagle face.
That was Ra with the eagle face?
Yeah, Ra has the head of a bird. But he was like the god of the sun, basically the god of like everything that's good and right is the best way I can think to explain him. But I'm probably way overshooting on that one.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay. And then what about Elohim?
Well, he's not an Egyptian god.
What is
And
Elohim? Isn't Elohim plural for gods and goddesses?
plural for gods and goddesses. If you want to narrow it down to the big guy, it'd be El or Eliam or Eliam, however you want to say that one. And did you and I talk about this earlier? I seem to
No,
remember talking
I
about it.
like this though. This is cool.
So there was this is where things get a little interesting. So this is like gospel according to me, but so take it with a grain of salt.
Salt is good, man. Wherewith has the salt lost its savor, man?
Yeah, fair enough. So the god of the Canaanites.
Ye are the salt of the earth. That's what it said.
That's what it is.
Okay.
So the god of the Canaanites was a I'll start over. So the Canaanites were precursors to the Israelites. You could look at the Israelites as like an offshoot of what the Canaanites once were, or of. Anyway, English my sentences, please.
Okay. So Canaanites came before Israelites.
Yeah, the Canaanites came before Israelites, and they were to the best of my understanding, and I reserve the right to be completely and totally wrong. So if you have comments turned on in any of your YouTube stuff, I'm not going to go read them anyway. But to the basis of my understanding, the Canaanites were precursors to the Israelites, and a lot of their belief structure and belief systems kind of bled over, because I mean you gotta start with somewhere, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, the Canaanites were, what's the term? Pantheistic. So they believed in a lot of different gods. You have the god of the sky, you have the god of this, god of that, goddess of that, etc. And what is interesting is that the Odin or Zeus figure, the old father, or I guess the elderly,
like the great father.
Yeah, like the great old beard of the gods, in their pantheon was a person or a figure called El, which is an interesting prospect. And like I said, I don't know very much about it. It's just a little bit of what I have read. And I'd be delighted to jump into something that kind of expresses and expands more on that. But I wouldn't doubt in the least if that was connected in some way to the Hebrew god of Eloi, Elyon, or Elohim. And yeah, Elohim is plural for gods, goddesses. I know there was a rabbi at one point that was asked about that because in the translation, Hebrew translation of like the Torah and some of the old scripts, in the creation it says Elohim, like the gods created the world.
I think that was the first use of God's name. Basically, was Elohim, something like that.
Potentially, and I
Potentially,
don't know that I can speak
yeah, potentially.
in any way.
Yahuwah Elohim, I've kind of heard too. Yahuwah.
Yeah, uh, there's also among them that I've heard Yahuwah, I've heard Yeshua, I've heard Jehovah. There's a lot of different renditions of the different names. So, but what's interesting is that in the Canaanite pantheon, El was the All Father God, the equivalent of Odin, right? But there was also another god who was Yeshua. And I know that it was believed that Yeshua would ultimately take over or become interchangeable with El in some way, which is a fascinating premise because according to the belief structure of many different sects of modern day religion, the God of the Old Testament was Yeshua, is Yeshua.
Is that Jesus? I've heard that that's like what Jesus's
That's
name should be.
Jesus. And what's interesting is that according to Christianity, he rose to the throne of God, or to be on the right hand, either the right hand or the throne itself. It really depends on where you read. And
I've heard that Yahusha too is kind of like it's a transliteration of what Jesus could be. Jesus's name truly should be.
I've heard Yahusha and I've heard Yeshua. And it's actually kind of
Yeshua, I've heard
close.
a
It's
lot.
kind of close to the name Joshua, which
Yeah.
is which is fascinating. So, hey, there you go.
That's why I've been praying more on those names than I have with Jesus. But then I go to church and then that's like everybody praises Jesus and that's what we know. So the power that
So,
they've created, but
well,
I feel like it's
actually.
closer to a Zeus than it is to what his real name was.
I love that you're bringing this up because when we were in Bagley, there were some really interesting characters that I call them the Yeshuites because they believed that according to the scripture that the name of the Messiah is the only name whereby salvation could be saved, that you had to get it dead on. And I was like, so that means that anybody who didn't speak Hebrew was going to hell. Basically, that's kind
That's
of
what I'm.
that was my understanding. And so I actually took that to the Lord and was like, look, if this is a thing, like, is this a thing? And he was like, well, I've visited a lot of people who speak a lot of languages and who have been a lot of places. Like, I have been a lot of places. So, do you think that they, based on the Hebrew understanding of the name of Jesus Christ or the name of Yeshua, are going to be allowed into heaven or allowed into the rest of God if they don't know my name? And I was like,
If they didn't know his true name, I don't see it as they will not make it there. But if they are given his, or if they are shown his name, then they should use the proper name, or at least try and open it up to other people and let them know.
mm-hmm.
But
And
I
I
don't
know
think
that
where the people have been deceived that they're going to be wrong because they're praising the God that they were taught.
dead on. Um, I remember having to explain multiple times, even when me and Mark were together, sharing and teaching about this type of stuff, having to explain multiple times about how a child living in Africa who steals because they're hungry is doing the absolute best that they can with what they have. And if they don't know that stealing is wrong, all they know is that if they don't, they're going to die. I don't imagine that God is going to. Oh, hi. Everything okay? Okay, good. Anyway, I don't imagine that God is going to damn that child. Like, there's definitely going to be learning. There's definitely going to be growth, but that comes into alignment with: do you believe that everything ends the moment you close your eyes in death, or leave your body in death? Because dead people don't always close their eyes. Anyway, so there's that. Man, that was kind of a wild tangent. I kind of ran all over the place.
I
didn't
like that. That was great. I love that. Have you ever seen that movie Les Miserables, or the play Les Miserables?
It's been a long time.
That's an interesting story. It reminded me of that when you were talking about the African kid and how Jean Valjean, he basically steals a bunch of stuff from the preacher, right? The pastor. He steals a bunch of his silver when the pastor takes him in for the night after this guy was like a prisoner for so many years. And then he goes. Who can explain that story better?
I think so. I only know a little bit. I'm trying to clean my hands too, so I look like I have tar on my.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, it's really really dark earth that
You've
I've
got
never
blood
cleaned.
on
Anyway,
your hands.
So in short, Jean Valjean ends up in prison for 17 years because he stole a loaf of bread to feed his family, like his sister's kids.
Yeah, the first time.
So, yeah, and so he's been. Is that 17 years for Jean Valjean?
I think he was. If I remember the book correctly, it's 14 years for the original, or like 5 years for the original crime, and then the rest because he tried to escape.
Oh, okay. So
like 17 years total, but mostly because they got really mad at him.
5 years, and then an additional, 12 years.
In a hard labor camp, yeah.
Yeah. So.
At the point where you could have waited, he did not go to sleep, and I need to so I can take care of it. Thank you.
So, basically, we meet Jean Valjean shortly before he decides to run away, and so he does. He runs. He gets brought in by a preacher for the night, and that priest takes him in, kind of like, yeah, go ahead and come in. And Jean Valjean decides to leave the next morning and steals his candles, or steals his silver.
His
silverware.
Silver sets, yeah.
Yeah, steals some silver things from him. And as he's running away, he gets caught by a constable or a gendarme, because, it's France. And the guy finds all the silver and takes him back to the priest's house. And the priest's response is, "Oh, I see." He's like, "I see you got the silver that I left for you," and he pulls up these candlesticks and he goes, "But you forgot the candlesticks," as a way of completely vindicating him. Like, it's okay, I'm not gonna rat you out to the police because I know that the system is corrupted, and then uses that as leverage to get Jean Valjean to change his life around completely. Basically says, like, I've forgiven you completely. And in fact, I haven't just forgiven you. Take even more than you initially stole, because it's a gift. And with this silver, I am buying your soul.
Yeah.
So go and be a good man.
Yeah.
And it's like a reverse Judas. It's super good.
That's
Alexander Dumas did really, I think is Dumas. Let me look at that one.
That's a crazy story. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. You had it right on though, Dale.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Victor Hugo, not Dumas.
Victor Hugo.
I think wrote. I think he wrote Count of Monte Cristo or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one.
So, but yeah, it's a really fascinating story in that capacity. As to whether or not you should use his name that way, it really comes down to. I recognize there's a lot of culture awareness, but at the same time, I remember I used to think language was such a big deal until I read in the scriptures at one point that the weakest of the spiritual gifts is the gift of tongues. the ability to communicate, because it's such a non-issue on the divine level.
Well, what's the highest one then?
I think they say prophecy, the ability
No.
to. What's your experience with that?
Charity, man.
Oh, well, yeah. I've heard prophecy, but without charity, you're nothing. So,
Exactly.
I mean,
It says with all, yeah, in the scripture on love or charity, it says that with all these, there's all these gifts, but without charity, you're nothing. Yeah.
that's true.
Well, and that's what that priest had for Jean Valjean. That was a level of charity. Well, cool, yeah. So Israel, we talked about Israel.
Talked about that.
We talked about Isis, Ra, and Elohim.
Isis is the god of like magic and healing or something like that, I think.
Who?
The worship of protector, healer, and magician married to Osiris.
Yeah, I know that she. I know that she was tied in there somewhere.
Osiris.
Yeah, Osiris. He's a character.
God of that's basically like Hades, really.
Yeah. Basically, the judge god is how I think of Osiris. But then you have Anubis, who's I don't really know. I know that he and Osiris work together. Anubis is the classic, like the dog-headed guy. I know he and Osiris work closely together because Osiris judges the dead, and I think Anubis takes them. Whichever one of those would technically be the Hades figure, I couldn't say for sure.
Okay.
If you could shift your experience into any mythology in the world, what would it be?
What do you mean?
So, Norse mythology, Egyptian mythology,
All
Greek,
of them.
Roman.
All of them. All of them all in one.
Just
All
like
of them.
spirituality and yeah, that's what
I'm talking like.
What do you mean?
Oneism.
Well, yeah, no, you could totally take the all-in-one approach.
It's called omniism. There's truth in all of them, but none of them are the truth.
That's an interesting thing.
Well, I think that every religion has I think every religion could be good.
Oh, yeah.
Hinduism, they say that Brahma is kind of like Abraham, and then there's Sarah. There's another one that's like supposedly just like Sarah, and it's a very similar story to Abraham and Sarah in Hinduism.
Oh yeah.
I love that you brought up Hinduism, because where I used to live in Indiana, we were a mile down from a beautiful, beautiful temple. And they let you walk in, like full on. It's not like the LDS temples, but they let you walk into the Hindu temples.
I think that was like a great question, because I think all religions need to come together in a sense. Like they need to. They should. At the end of the day, I think there's, like in the Bible, it says there's one Lord, one faith. Goes so far to say one baptism. But every single one of them has parallels. I think there is part of the truth in every single one of them. So that's how it should be taken seriously. And we should be open. That was one of the things that I always liked about Gordon B. Hinckley, like the LDS faith, is they believe in all truth, and they believe that's one of the modern day prophets have one thing that they've said. We haven't heard as much of it lately, but I mean, that was what Gordon B. Hinckley used to always say.
Yeah.
And so
all truth is eventually to be circumscribed into one great whole.
What?
All truth is eventually destined to be circumscribed into one great whole, like Einstein's unified field therapy. Unified field therapy? Therapy? What the? Theory. It probably could be turned into therapy anyway. But no, like that entire premise of truth begets truth absolutely applies. I have a brother-in-law right now who's working on a project of bringing together all the various applicable knowledge that he can gather from the different world religions, at least the ones he feels led to, and he's been combining them I know his work initially started when he was looking at Hinduism and a lot of the different world origin stories, and finding a way to not compromise but connect them together and find deeper measures of truth. Um, which I admire his work a lot. Think I do not think I have the brain to keep it all together. That's me talking personally, because that's a lot.
Well, I think that's the way. I think that's the right way.
So he's actually got some pretty interesting stuff on it. It's called Zozvrm, Zozvrm. It's online, and I know that he's posts to it pretty regularly. He so calls it
Spell that again, the Zaz.
Zozvrm, Zozvrm. It's kind of a weird one, but I've always come away like I don't always go in thinking like, oh yeah, this is like dead on. But I always come away going, huh, that's given me a lot to think about. Search instead for Zosburn. Hey, there it is, right at the top of my list. Yeah, he's a fascinating storyteller. I know that I say storyteller because story really is it's how the truths of humanity have been passed down. Yes. But it is a fascinating and incredible experience. I will say this though, if you do not already have a faith walk and a pretty firm foundation as far as things are concerned, it might be something to tack up on your bulletin board for later. That's what I'm going to share. It's because there are some times where getting too deep into the weeds and you can't see the forest for the trees, you kind of like lose track of what you're actually trying to understand and grow into. Mm-hmm. And because he gets into some pretty intense, pretty deep stuff, and not like intense in the sense of like it's the kind of thing that makes you question some of the systems that you may have already put up. Like in my experience, I know there was instances where I was like, huh, is what I've believed my entire life about a certain experience actually the case? And pondering and thinking about it, was able to walk away with a better understanding and an appreciation of that understanding that made the entire experience even stronger. But it took me a while. It took me like weeks to really come around to go, oh, I think I understand, as I just pondered on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's great. It's great, yeah. And I think that there's so many ways you can take any bit of information, and you can take the positive approach, keep an open mind. Sometimes things you'll hear with religion or faith will just shatter where you are, and it'll like rip your heart apart. And you have to do some real meditating and like, really pondering, really praying about some things to find out the way to go. So it's definitely happened to me. We've been going on this for like an hour, so should we call it good? We talked.
I think so.
That was
this
fun.
Has been fascinating.
That was fun. Josh, any last words?
Peace and prosperity and progress, I guess. I don't know.
Did you say prosperity or post? It sounded like you said posterity.
Peace and posterity.
You said peace and posterity, right?
That's like bold. The road that we used to freaking. So there's a road that led from his house to my house, and we'd skate down it, and we'd call peace and prosperity.
No, we call it peace and prosperity. Well, hey,
what prosperity means.
Posterity. He said posterity. Prosperity. Prosperity
makes sense.
Prosperity.
Oh yeah, peace and prosperity.
It was peace and prosperity. Prosperity, like success.
Posterity.
So I hope we are all blessed with peace, posterity, and prosperity today, and forever and always.
There you go.
Thanks.